Marcus Williams pushed his mop bucket down the gleaming hallway of Meridian Corporate Tower, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished marble floor. At 52, his back ached from years of bending over sinks and scrubbing floors, but he maintained his steady pace. The early morning shift was his favorite time. The building was quiet, peaceful, and he could work without the constant stream of suited executives rushing past him like he was invisible. He had been cleaning these same floors for 8 years now, ever since he moved to the city. Most people assumed he had always been a janitor, that this was the peak of his ambitions. They saw the gray uniform, the weathered hands, the slight limp he carried from an old injury, and they made their judgments. Marcus never corrected them. He had learned long ago that sometimes it was easier to let people believe what they wanted to believe. The elevator dinged, and Marcus glanced up to see 3 young executives stepping out. They were the type he had come to recognize easily, fresh out of business school, expensive suits, and attitudes that matched their inflated salaries. The tall one with slicked back hair was Derek Patterson, a marketing manager who had joined the company 6 months ago. The blonde woman beside him was Sarah Chen, an analyst who thought her MBA made her superior to everyone around her. The third was Jake Morrison, a project coordinator who spent more time taking credit for other people's work than actually doing his own. "Morning," Marcus said politely, moving his bucket to the side to let them pass. Derek barely glanced at him. "Yeah, whatever. Make sure you get the coffee stain by conference room B. The clients are coming in today, and we can't have the place looking like a dump." "Already cleaned it, sir," Marcus replied quietly. Sarah laughed, a sharp sound that echoed in the hallway. "Sir?" "Derek, I think the janitor just called you sir." "How formal." "Probably doesn't know any better," Jake added, pulling out his phone. "Some people just aren't cut out for the corporate world, you know? Born to push a mop, I guess." Marcus continued mopping, his expression unchanged. He had heard worse over the years. Much worse. These 3 reminded him of kids playing dress-up in their parents' clothes, trying to act important when they barely understood how the world really worked. Derek stopped and turned back, apparently not done with his morning entertainment. "Hey, janitor guy. What's your name again?" "Marcus Williams." "Right, Marcus. You've been here a while, haven't you?" 8 years? That's dedication, I'll give you that. Not everyone can stick with such a simple job for so long. The condescension dripped from his words like honey from a spoon. Sarah and Jake snickered, clearly enjoying the show. Marcus had seen this before, young people with new power, testing their authority on someone they perceived as beneath them. "Yes, sir." 8 years, Marcus said simply. "Ever think about doing something more with your life?" Sarah asked, her voice mockingly concerned. "I mean, you seem smart enough to speak in complete sentences. Maybe you could work up to, I don't know, security guard? Or maybe learn a trade?" "This suits me fine, ma'am." Jake shook his head dramatically. "Man, that's depressing. No ambition at all." "I can't imagine being satisfied with just cleaning up after other people your whole life." Marcus squeezed out his mop, the water dripping back into the bucket with soft plops. "Everyone serves a purpose." "Deep thoughts from the janitor," Derek said with a grin. "What's next, life advice from the vending machine guy?" The 3 walked away, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Marcus watched them go, then returned to his work. He had dealt with their type before, in places where the stakes were much higher than office politics and quarterly reports. As he worked, Marcus thought about purpose. These young executives thought they understood success, thought their corner offices and expense accounts made them important. They measured worth in dollars and titles, never understanding that real value came from different places entirely. An hour later, Marcus was cleaning the executive washroom when he heard raised voices from the adjacent conference room. Through the thin wall, he could make out Derek's voice, tight with panic. "I don't understand how this happened. The Morrison account was supposed to be locked down. Now they're threatening to pull out completely?" $3 million, came another voice Marcus didn't recognize. That's what this company stands to lose if we can't resolve this situation by Friday. Marcus paused in his cleaning, not because he was trying to eavesdrop, but because something about the tone reminded him of briefings he used to attend. Crisis management. Damage control. The kind of high-pressure situations where cool heads made the difference between success and catastrophe. What do they want? Sarah's voice, no longer confident and mocking. An apology. Assurance that the cultural sensitivity issues in our marketing campaign will be addressed. And they want to speak with someone who understands military protocol. Apparently, our campaign inadvertently disrespected some veterans organization they support. Marcus nearly smiled. Military protocol. These kids were about to learn that their expensive educations had some significant gaps. The voices continued for another 20 minutes, growing more desperate with each passing moment. The executives were scrambling, clearly out of their depth when faced with a real crisis that couldn't be solved with buzzwords and PowerPoint presentations. When Marcus finished cleaning the washroom, he moved on to the break room, where he found the three executives huddled around a laptop, looking defeated. "We're screwed," Jake was saying. "None of us knows anything about military stuff. HR says they can't find anyone in the company with military experience on such short notice. What about hiring a consultant?" Sarah suggested. "At this hour? By Friday? Do you know what they charge for emergency consulting?" Derek ran his hands through his hair, messing up his carefully styled look. "The budget's already blown from the original campaign disaster." Marcus continued stacking chairs, working quietly around them. The irony wasn't lost on him. They spent their morning mocking him for being just a janitor, and now they were facing a crisis that required exactly the kind of experience they assumed he couldn't possibly have. "Maybe we should just admit we messed up and take the loss," Jake said miserably. "And watch our careers go down the drain?" Derek snapped. "This was supposed to be our big break. Now it's going to be the thing that gets us all fired." Marcus finished stacking the chairs and began wiping down the tables. As he worked, he listened to them spiral deeper into panic, throwing out increasingly desperate ideas that showed just how little they understood about the situation they were facing. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly. The three looked up, apparently having forgotten he was there. "Sorry, we'll move," Derek said distractedly. "We're just having a crisis meeting." "I couldn't help but overhear," Marcus said. "Military protocol issue with a client?" Sarah looked annoyed. "It's complicated. Nothing you'd understand." Marcus nodded slowly. "Probably not. But I did serve for a while. If you need someone to look over whatever you did wrong, I might be able to point you in the right direction. Wouldn't charge consultant fees." The three exchanged glances. Derek laughed, but it was strained. "No offense, Marcus, but this is a pretty serious corporate situation. We need someone with real expertise, not just someone who maybe spent a few years in the Army." "Navy," Marcus corrected gently. "But I understand. Good luck with your situation." He turned to leave, but Jake called after him. "Wait. Navy? What did you do in the Navy?" Marcus paused. "This and that. Mostly followed orders and tried to stay out of trouble." "For how long?" Sarah asked, her tone slightly less dismissive. 22 years. The number hung in the air. 22 years wasn't a casual stint. That was a career. A lifetime of service. Derek cleared his throat. "What rank did you retire at?" "I didn't retire," Marcus said simply. "Medical discharge after an injury. But I made it to Senior Chief Petty Officer before that happened." The three executives stared at him. Senior Chief Petty Officer was a significant rank, one that carried real responsibility and respect. It wasn't the background they expected from someone they had dismissed as just a janitor that morning. "Senior Chief," Jake repeated slowly. That's pretty high up, isn't it?" "High enough to understand protocol," Marcus said. high enough to know what honors veterans and what doesn't. If you want to tell me what happened with your campaign, I might be able to help you figure out how to fix it. Sarah looked skeptical. Why would you help us? We haven't exactly been friendly this morning. Marcus shrugged. Because the company pays my salary too. And because fixing mistakes is what you do when things go wrong. You don't just give up and let people down. Derek hesitated, then gestured to a chair. Okay. Sit down. Let me show you what we're dealing with. For the first time since he had known them, Marcus sat at the same table as the three executives. Derek opened his laptop and pulled up the marketing campaign that had caused the crisis. Marcus studied the screen, his expression growing more serious with each slide. The campaign was for a luxury watch company, and the theme was precision under pressure. The images showed actors dressed as military personnel in various dramatic poses, using the watches during what were supposed to be combat situations. But Marcus could see the problems immediately. The uniforms were wrong, mixed up between different branches and eras. The poses were Hollywood dramatic rather than tactically sound. Worst of all, one image showed an actor in a Navy uniform saluting with his left hand while wearing the watch prominently on his right wrist. Oh, Marcus said quietly. What? Sarah asked. What's wrong? Well, Marcus said, for starters, you never salute with your left hand. Ever. And mixing uniform elements from different branches like this. He pointed to another image. That's like wearing a police badge with a firefighter's helmet. It shows you don't understand or respect what the uniform represents. Jake leaned forward. But they're just actors. It's advertising. To you, maybe. But to someone who wore that uniform for real, who lost friends wearing that uniform, it's different. It's like... Marcus paused, thinking of how to explain it. Imagine someone made an ad using fake medical scrubs, but they got everything wrong about hospitals. Had the actor wearing a stethoscope around his ankle or something? Doctors would notice. They'd be offended. Same principle. Derek stared at the campaign with new understanding. We had no idea. The ad agency assured us everything was accurate. They probably looked it up on the internet and grabbed whatever looked military, Marcus said. Happens a lot. Most people don't know the difference between a Marine and a soldier, or what different insignia mean. But when you're using those images to sell something, the people who do know the difference pay attention. So what do we do? Sarah asked. The client wants an apology and assurance that we understand military protocol. How do we prove that? Marcus looked at the three young faces staring at him with something approaching respect for the first time. They were finally starting to understand that their expensive educations had left some significant gaps in their knowledge. First, he said, you need to understand what you did wrong. Really understand it, not just memorize an apology someone else wrote. Then, you need to fix it properly. Can you help us do that? Derek asked. Marcus considered the question. These three had spent the morning treating him like he was invisible, assuming he was too simple to understand their important business world. Now they needed something only he could provide. I can try, he said finally. But you need to understand something. This isn't just about saving your client or your jobs. When you get military protocol wrong in a public way, you're disrespecting people who gave up a lot to serve. Some of them gave up everything. That's not something you fix just to make money. The room fell quiet. For the first time since Marcus had known them, the three executives weren't thinking about bonuses or promotions or impressing their bosses. They were thinking about consequences that went beyond their small world of office politics. We'll do whatever it takes, Jake said quietly. We honestly didn't know. But now that we do. Now that you do, you have a responsibility, Marcus finished. To get it right. To show respect. And to make sure this doesn't happen again. Derek closed the laptop. Will you help us? Not just with this crisis, but to actually understand what we should have known from the beginning? Marcus looked at each of them in turn. They were young, arrogant, and had treated him poorly. But they were also admitting their mistakes and asking to learn. That counted for something. "I'll help," he said. "But we do this right. No shortcuts, no half measures. If we're going to fix this, we fix it properly." The three nodded, and Marcus saw something in their faces he hadn't seen before: humility. It was a start. As they began to plan their next steps, Marcus thought about the morning's events. A few hours ago, these executives had mocked him for being just a janitor. Now they were depending on him to save their careers and their company's reputation. The irony wasn't lost on him. But, more importantly, it was a reminder that respect wasn't something you got from a title or a corner office. It was something you earned, one decision at a time, one moment of integrity at a time. And, sometimes, it came from the most unexpected places. Marcus spent his lunch break in the company library, pulling military protocol manuals from his memory and writing them down in simple terms the executives could understand. He hadn't talked about his Navy experience in years, but the knowledge came back like riding a bicycle. Some things, once learned under pressure, never really left you. When he returned to find the three executives, they were in Derek's office, looking more worried than before. Sarah was on the phone, apparently getting more bad news. "The client wants to meet tomorrow," she said after hanging up. "Mr. Harrison from Morrison Industries will be here at 10 a.m. He's bringing his military liaison, someone from the Veterans Affairs Advisory Board." Jake groaned. "A military liaison? This keeps getting worse." "Not worse," Marcus said from the doorway. "Better. Military people appreciate straight talk and honest effort. If we do this right, this could actually strengthen your relationship with the client." Derek gestured for Marcus to come in. Over the past few hours, the dynamic had shifted completely. The man they had dismissed as just a janitor was now the most important person in the room. "What do you need us to do?" Derek asked. Marcus pulled out the notes he had prepared. "First, you need to understand what you're apologizing for. It's not just about getting the uniforms wrong. It's about using military imagery to sell luxury goods without understanding what that imagery represents to the people who lived it." He sat down across from Derek's desk, feeling strange to be in the executive office as anything other than the person who emptied the trash cans. "Let me ask you something," Marcus continued. "What do you think of when you see a military uniform?" Sarah shrugged. "Authority, I guess. Discipline. Strength. Heroism," Jake added. "People fighting for freedom. Those aren't wrong," Marcus said. "But, for someone who actually wore the uniform, it means something more personal. It means the friend who didn't come home. It means missing your kid's birthday because you were deployed. It means following orders even when you're scared, because other people are counting on you." Derek leaned forward. "So when we used those images to sell watches, you turned those sacrifices into a marketing gimmick. You made their service about looking cool and successful, instead of about service and sacrifice." The room fell silent as the weight of that realization sank in. "How do we fix it?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus opened his notebook. "First, we need to completely redesign the campaign. No fake military imagery. If you want to honor precision under pressure, find real stories of people who actually lived it, and get their permission first." "What about the immediate crisis?" Derek asked. "The meeting tomorrow?" "We go in with a real plan, not just an apology. We show them we understand what went wrong and how we're going to make it right. And we bring someone who can speak their language." "You," Jake said. Marcus hesitated. "I'm a janitor, remember? You think your client is going to be impressed when the custodial staff handles their crisis?" Derek looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, about this morning, the things we said." "Forget about it," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he hadn't forgotten at all. The question is whether you're willing to let the janitor represent your company in front of an important client. The three exchanged glances. Their prejudices were warring with their desperation. What choice do we have? Sarah said finally. You're the only one who actually knows what he's talking about. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, Marcus said dryly. Derek stood up suddenly. You're right. We've been idiots. Complete idiots. This morning we treated you like you were beneath us, and now we need you to save our careers. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to the client who deserves better than our ignorance. So what are you saying? Marcus asked. I'm saying we were wrong. About you, about what matters, about everything. And I'm asking, not as your superior to a subordinate, but as someone who messed up, asking someone who can help, will you please help us fix this? It was the first genuine moment Marcus had seen from Derek. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like actual humility. Under one condition, Marcus said. Name it. We do this right. Not just enough to save your jobs, but enough to actually honor the people we disrespected. That means more than just fixing the campaign. It means making sure your company never makes this mistake again. Agreed, Derek said immediately. Whatever it takes. Marcus nodded. Then, let's get to work. They spent the next several hours completely reimagining their approach. Marcus explained the significance of different military traditions, the proper way to display respect for service members, and how to talk about military service without turning it into a commodity. The key, Marcus explained, is authenticity. Military people can spot a fake from a mile away. They've seen too many politicians and corporations try to wrap themselves in the flag for profit. But they also appreciate genuine respect and honest effort. What should we say about you in the meeting? Sarah asked. I mean, you're obviously more than qualified to speak on this, but my job title is janitor, Marcus finished. Look, I'd been in corporate America long enough to know how this works. Titles matter to people like you. So we need to figure out how to present this properly. Derek was quiet for a moment. What if we don't? Don't what? Don't worry about your job title. What if we just introduce you as Marcus Williams, the company's military protocol advisor? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm not a military protocol advisor. I'm a janitor who happens to know about military protocol. For tomorrow, does the difference matter? Jake asked. You know more about this than anyone else in the company. You're advising us on military protocol. That makes you our military protocol advisor. Your executives were afraid to have the janitor speak for the company, Marcus said bluntly. Then, maybe we need to examine what being an executive really means, Derek said. Because right now, the janitor is the most valuable person in this building. Marcus studied their faces. Something had shifted in the past few hours. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like actual respect. All right, he said finally. Military protocol advisor it is. But I'm still going to mop floors when this is over. Maybe, Sarah said quietly. Or maybe the company needs to think about better ways to use its resources. As evening approached, Marcus found himself in an unusual position. The three executives who had mocked him that morning were now hanging on his every word, taking detailed notes as he explained military customs and courtesies. The most important thing to remember, Marcus said, is that military culture values directness, accountability, and follow-through. Don't try to impress them with fancy language or corporate speak. Tell them what went wrong, what you're doing to fix it, and how you're going to prevent it from happening again. What if they ask about your background? Derek asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. They might. Military people tend to recognize each other. If they ask, I'll answer honestly. What exactly did you do in the Navy? Sarah asked. I mean, we know you were a senior chief, but... Marcus hesitated. He had spent 8 years avoiding this conversation, letting people make their assumptions rather than correcting them. But these three had earned the right to know. "I was a Special Operations Command Master at Arms," he said finally. "Naval Security Forces. 22 years, including deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan." The room went completely silent. Special Operations was a world away from what they had imagined when they saw him pushing a mop bucket. "You were Special Ops?" Jake said weakly. "For the last 10 years of my career, yes." "And you've been cleaning our offices for 8 years, Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Good honest work," Marcus said simply. "Nothing wrong with it." But the three executives were clearly struggling with this revelation. The man they had dismissed as lacking ambition had spent 2 decades in some of the most demanding military roles possible. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Sarah asked. Marcus shrugged. "People see what they expect to see. You saw a janitor, so that's what I was to you. Easier than explaining." "Explaining what?" "That sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. That sometimes injuries end careers. That sometimes starting over means taking whatever honest work you can find and being grateful for it." Derek ran his hands through his hair. "We've been such complete idiots." "You've been young people with limited perspective," Marcus corrected. "That's different. The question is what you do with new information." As they prepared to leave for the day, Marcus realized something had fundamentally changed. The three executives who had started the morning as his social superiors were ending it as students, eager to learn from someone they were finally beginning to see clearly. "Marcus," Derek said as they gathered their papers. "Tomorrow's meeting, are you nervous?" Marcus considered the question. "I've briefed generals and admirals. I've given situation reports under hostile fire. I think I can handle a corporate client meeting." "Right. Of course." Derek looked embarrassed by the question. "But," Marcus continued, "I am concerned about representing your company well. Your careers are on the line, and you're trusting them to someone most people would never look twice at." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe we've been looking at the wrong things." As they parted ways for the evening, Marcus reflected on the strange day. In the space of 12 hours, he had gone from invisible janitor to essential advisor. The same knowledge and experience had been in his head that morning when they mocked him, and that evening when they depended on him. The only thing that had changed was their willingness to look beyond their assumptions. Walking to his car, Marcus thought about the meeting tomorrow. He had handled much more difficult situations, but those had been in uniform, with clear rank and authority. Tomorrow, he would be representing people who had spent the morning questioning his intelligence and worth. But maybe that was exactly the lesson everyone needed to learn, that worth wasn't determined by job titles or corner offices, but by knowledge, integrity, and the willingness to do what was right when it mattered. The real test wouldn't be whether they could save the Morrison account. It would be whether Derek, Sarah, and Jake could learn to see people differently. Whether they could understand that respect was earned through actions, not granted through positions. And whether they could remember those lessons when the crisis was over and the normal order of things tried to reassert itself. Marcus had seen too many people change their tune when they needed something, only to revert to their old attitudes once the crisis passed. Tomorrow's meeting would be important, but what happened afterward would be the real measure of whether anything had actually changed. As he drove home through the evening traffic, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. After 8 years of being invisible, tomorrow he would finally be seen. The question was whether he would still be visible the day after that. Marcus arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning. He had traded his gray janitor's uniform for his best suit, a navy blue outfit he kept for funerals and rare formal occasions. It was well tailored but not expensive, the kind of suit a working man wore when the situation demanded respect. Derek, Sarah, and Jake were already in the conference room, looking nervous and over-caffeinated. They had clearly been there for hours, arranging and rearranging their presentation materials. "You clean up nice," Derek said when Marcus walked in. There was no condescension in his voice, just genuine appreciation. "Thank you." How are you all holding up? Terrified, Sarah admitted. This is the biggest client meeting any of us have ever handled alone. You won't be alone, Marcus reminded her. And, remember what I told you yesterday, military people appreciate honesty and directness. Don't try to be something you're not. Just be people who made a mistake and are committed to fixing it. Jake was pacing by the window. What if they ask questions we can't answer? Then, you say I don't know, but I'll find out, Marcus said. Never guess. Never make something up. Admit what you don't know, and commit to learning it. At exactly 10 o'clock, the receptionist called to announce their visitors. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came before important missions. Years of high-stakes situations had taught him to channel nervous energy into focused preparation. Remember, he said to the three executives, let Derek do most of the talking since it's his account, but don't be afraid to contribute if you have something valuable to add. And, whatever happens, we present a united front. The conference room door opened, and Marcus immediately understood why the three executives were nervous. Richard Harrison was exactly what you'd expect from a successful industrial executive, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. But it was the woman beside him who caught Marcus's attention. Colonel Patricia Martinez, U.S. Army, retired, moved with the precise economy of motion that marked career military personnel. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct, and Marcus could tell she had sized up everyone in the room within the first 30 seconds. Thank you for making time to meet with us, Derek began, his voice only slightly shaky. We want to address the concerns about our recent marketing campaign and discuss how we can move forward constructively. I appreciate directness, Harrison said, taking his seat. So let me be direct with you. Your campaign was offensive, unprofessional, and showed a complete disregard for the military community that Morrison Industries has supported for decades. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah went pale, and Jake looked like he might be sick. But Marcus noticed something else in Harrison's tone, disappointment rather than anger. This was a man who wanted to believe they could do better. Mr. Harrison is absolutely right, Derek said, his voice steadier now. Our campaign was all of those things. We made assumptions without doing our homework, and we used military imagery inappropriately to sell luxury goods. There's no excuse for that. Colonel Martinez leaned forward slightly. Go on. We brought someone with us today who can speak to the specific problems with our campaign and how we plan to address them. Marcus Williams, our military protocol advisor. Marcus stood, noting the slight surprise in Colonel Martinez's expression. She had clearly been expecting another corporate executive, not someone who carried himself like former military. Colonel Martinez, Mr. Harrison, Marcus said, extending his hand. Thank you for your time today. The colonel's handshake lingered just a moment longer than necessary, her eyes studying his face. Have we met before, Mr. Williams? I don't believe so, ma'am, though we may have served in some of the same areas. Navy, Special Operations Command, 22 years. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate. Colonel Martinez's posture shifted slightly, moving from formal business mode to the subtle recognition that passed between veterans. Special Operations Command, she repeated. Master at Arms? Yes, ma'am. Retired Senior Chief. Harrison looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. Colonel, you know Mr. Williams? No, but I know the type. Senior Chief in Special Operations doesn't happen by accident. She turned back to Marcus. How long have you been with the company? 8 years, ma'am. And your role? Marcus hesitated for just a moment. This was the moment of truth. My primary position is in facility maintenance, Colonel. I was brought into this situation because I happened to overhear the discussion and recognized the nature of the problem. The silence stretched for several seconds. Colonel Martinez was clearly processing this information, while Harrison looked confused. Facility maintenance, the colonel repeated slowly. Yes, ma'am. I'm a janitor. Derek jumped in quickly. Marcus has been invaluable in helping us understand what went wrong with our campaign and how to fix it properly. But Colonel Martinez was still focused on Marcus. Senior Chief, you left the Navy and became a janitor? Medical discharge after an IED incident in Afghanistan, ma'am. Took what work I could find when I moved here. It's honest work. The colonel nodded slowly, and Marcus could see the understanding in her eyes. She knew the statistics about veteran employment, about the challenges of translating military skills to civilian careers, about the pride that sometimes had to be swallowed when circumstances changed. And these three executives came to you for help with their military protocol problem, she said. In a manner of speaking, yes, ma'am. Sarah cleared her throat. Actually, Colonel, we should be completely honest about this. Yesterday morning, we were. She paused, clearly struggling with the admission, we were making fun of Marcus. We treated him badly, assumed he was just a janitor with no real knowledge or experience. Jake picked up the thread. When our crisis hit and we needed military expertise, we were ready to hire expensive consultants. Marcus offered to help, and we almost turned him down because we couldn't see past his job title. Derek nodded. We were arrogant, prejudiced, and wrong. Marcus saved our account, but, more importantly, he taught us something about respect and assumptions. Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly fascinated by this unexpected turn. Colonel Martinez's expression was unreadable. So the janitor is your military expert, she said finally. The senior chief is our military expert, Derek corrected. His current job title doesn't change his knowledge or experience. Marcus appreciated the defense, but he could see Colonel Martinez was working through something more complex than just the immediate situation. Tell me about the campaign, she said to Marcus. What exactly was wrong with it? Marcus pulled out his notes and methodically went through each problem, the mixed uniform elements, the improper saluting, the general attitude that treated military service as a fashion statement rather than a serious commitment. The fundamental issue, Marcus concluded, was using military imagery to sell luxury goods without understanding or respecting what those symbols represent to the people who earned the right to wear them. And how would you fix it? Complete redesign. If the client wants to honor precision under pressure, use real stories from real people who lived it. With their permission, and with genuine respect for their service. Focus on the values, integrity, dedication, sacrifice, rather than just the visual symbols. Colonel Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to speak with Senior Chief Williams privately for a few minutes. Harrison nodded, and the three executives filed out of the room, leaving Marcus alone with the colonel. Close the door, she said quietly. Marcus did as instructed, then returned to his seat. How long ago was your discharge? She asked. 9 years, ma'am. And you've been cleaning offices since then? Not immediately. Took some time to figure things out. Tried a few different jobs, but the injury limited my options. Found this position 8 years ago. What happened to you over there? Marcus was quiet for a moment. IED took out our vehicle. I was the only one who made it out. The words hung in the air between them. Colonel Martinez nodded slowly, understanding flooding her expression. Survivor's guilt is a hell of a thing, she said softly. Yes, ma'am. And you've been punishing yourself ever since, haven't you? Taking a job that keeps you invisible, that lets you disappear into the background. Marcus looked out the window at the city below. It's honest work, Colonel. Nothing wrong with it. No, there isn't. But there's also nothing wrong with using your skills and experience in ways that honor what you learned and who you lost. She stood and walked to the window. Those three executives out there, they learned something yesterday, didn't they? I hope so, ma'am. They learned that respect isn't about job titles or corner offices. They learned that real worth comes from character and competence, not position and prestige. That's a good lesson for anyone to learn. It is. But here's what I'm wondering, Senior Chief, when are you going to learn it? Marcus looked up at her, confused. You've spent 8 years hiding behind a mop bucket because you think that's all you deserve after losing your team. You've let people treat you as invisible because some part of you believes you should be invisible. But, yesterday, when it mattered, you stepped up. You used your knowledge and experience to help people who needed it. Marcus was quiet, processing her words. Those executives were wrong to treat you the way they did, Colonel Martinez continued. But, you were wrong to let them. You've been doing yourself a disservice, and you've been depriving the world of what you have to offer. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not sure what you're getting at. She turned back to him. I'm getting at the fact that hiding your light under a bushel doesn't honor the people you lost. Living up to your potential does. Using your skills to help others does. Being the leader I can see you are does. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, a recognition he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Let's bring the others back in, Colonel Martinez said. I want to see how this plays out. When the 3 executives returned, the dynamic in the room had changed again. Marcus could see it in Colonel Martinez's posture, in the way she looked at Derek, Sarah, and Jake. I've reviewed your proposal, she said, though Marcus knew they had spent most of their private time discussing other things. And, I have a recommendation for Mr. Harrison. Harrison leaned forward attentively. I think Morrison Industries should continue its relationship with this company. Derek exhaled in visible relief, while Sarah and Jake looked like they might collapse from the stress release. However, the colonel continued, I have conditions. Anything, Derek said quickly. First, the campaign gets completely redesigned according to Senior Chief Williams's specifications. No shortcuts, no compromises. Absolutely. Second, this company implements mandatory sensitivity training for all employees who work on campaigns involving military themes or imagery. Of course. Third, Senior Chief Williams oversees the training and serves as your ongoing consultant for any military-related work. Marcus started to object. Colonel, I appreciate the confidence, but nothing, Senior Chief. These people need you, and, frankly, you need to stop hiding from what you're capable of. Harrison was nodding approvingly. I like this arrangement. Marcus, would you be interested in taking on this consulting role? I'm honored by the offer, sir, but I have a full-time job. Derek cleared his throat. Actually, Marcus, what if that changed? What if the company had a position that better matched your skills and experience? Marcus looked around the room at faces that had transformed from dismissive to desperate to respectful in the span of 48 hours. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you the job you should have had from the beginning, Derek said. If you want it. Colonel Martinez smiled. Sometimes, Senior Chief, the universe has ways of putting us where we need to be, even when we're too stubborn to see it ourselves. Marcus felt the weight of 8 years of invisibility, of hiding, of convincing himself he deserved less than he was capable of. He thought about the team he had lost, and what they would want for him. I'd like to think about it, he said finally. Fair enough, Harrison said. But, don't think too long. Morrison Industries values people who can teach others to see what they've been missing. As the meeting concluded and hands were shaken, Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in how others saw him, but in how he was beginning to see himself. The janitor who had been mocked yesterday morning was gone. In his place stood someone who was finally ready to stop hiding from his own worth. 3 months later, Marcus Williams sat in his new office, reviewing the final proofs for the redesigned Morrison Industries campaign. The images showed real veterans in civilian clothes, talking about moments when precision and timing had mattered in their lives. No uniforms, no military hardware, just authentic stories of people who had learned to perform under pressure. The campaign would launch next week, and early feedback from veteran focus groups had been overwhelmingly positive. More importantly, Morrison Industries had decided to donate a portion of proceeds to veteran employment programs. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Derek Patterson stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Got a minute? Derek asked. Sure, come in. Derek handed him a coffee and took a seat across from the desk. The dynamic between them had evolved significantly over the past few months. What had started as a desperate need for Marcus's expertise had developed into genuine professional respect and something approaching friendship. "The Morrison campaign looks great," Derek said. "Harrison called this morning. He's thrilled with the direction." "Good. That's what we were hoping for." He also mentioned something else. "Morrison Industries wants to discuss a long-term consulting arrangement with you specifically." Apparently, they're considering a major expansion into veteran-owned business partnerships, and they want someone they trust to help them navigate that properly. Marcus set down his coffee. "That's a significant opportunity." "It is. And it's entirely yours if you want it." Derek paused. "I wanted to thank you again for taking the company position instead of going independent after our meeting with Harrison. You could have started your own consulting firm and made a lot more money." Marcus shrugged. "Money isn't everything. Besides, I like the work we're doing here." It was true. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had helped the company avoid several potential cultural sensitivity issues, developed training programs for the staff, and built relationships with veteran organizations that had opened up new business opportunities. The work was satisfying in ways that surprised him. Derek leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot." "That first day, when we were being such idiots in the hallway, did you know you could have shut us down immediately? Made us look foolish by revealing your background?" Marcus considered the question. "Yeah, I knew." "Why didn't you?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it. People have to be ready to see things differently before they can actually see them differently. If I had told you my background while you were still in full arrogance mode, you would have either not believed me or resented me for making you feel small. And, by waiting until we needed you. By waiting until you were desperate enough to listen, you were also humble enough to learn." Derek shook his head. "That's pretty manipulative." Marcus laughed. "It's strategic. Big difference. In the Navy, we called it choosing your battles." "Speaking of the Navy," Derek said, "I heard through the grapevine that you got a call from Colonel Martinez last week." "News travels fast around here. It's a small office." "What did she want?" Marcus hesitated. The conversation with Colonel Martinez had been both flattering and challenging. "She's part of a task force that's developing new programs for veteran employment and business development. They offered me a position as a program director." Derek went very still. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It is. Are you considering it?" Marcus looked out the window of his office at the city beyond. "I'm thinking about it. It would be a chance to help a lot of veterans who are struggling with the same transitions I went through. Make sure they don't end up invisible for 8 years like I was. But I've gotten comfortable here. Built something good with this team. Started to feel like I belong somewhere again." Derek was quiet for a moment. "You know what you told me about choosing battles?" "Yeah. Maybe this isn't about choosing between battles. Maybe this is about understanding what war you're really fighting." Marcus looked at him questioningly. "The war isn't for your comfort or security," Derek continued. "It's for making sure other people don't go through what you went through. You taught us to see differently, but how many other people are still making the same assumptions we made? How many other veterans are out there thinking they're not good enough for anything better than hiding in plain sight?" The words hit harder than Derek probably intended. Over the past few months, Marcus had received emails and calls from veterans who had heard about his story through various networks. Many of them were struggling with similar issues: underemployment, invisible careers, the difficulty of translating military experience into civilian success. "The task force position would let you help hundreds of people," Derek added. "Maybe thousands. And leave you guys to handle military consulting without someone who actually knows what they're talking about." Derek smiled. "Marcus, 3 months ago we didn't know the difference between a Marine and a soldier. Now Sarah can explain proper flag protocol, Jake understands the significance of different service medals, and I can spot inappropriate military imagery from across the room. You taught us well. You learned well. There's a difference. Either way, we're not the same people who mocked the janitor anymore. And, honestly, if you stay here because you're worried about us, you're not giving us enough credit for our own growth. Marcus had to admit Derek had a point. The three executives had transformed remarkably over the past few months. They approached new projects with cultural sensitivity, asked thoughtful questions about their campaigns, and had developed genuine respect for the military community they served. Plus, Derek added with a grin, if you take the task force job, we can hire you as a consultant for the really tricky projects. Best of both worlds. Another knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Sarah and Jake appeared, looking excited about something. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah said, but we just got off a call with the Department of Veterans Affairs. They saw our Morrison campaign and want to discuss a major project. What kind of project? Marcus asked. A national campaign to encourage veteran entrepreneurship. They want authentic messaging that speaks to veterans without talking down to them. Jake was practically bouncing with excitement. It's exactly the kind of work you've been preparing us for. Marcus looked at the three faces in front of him, the same three people who had dismissed him as lacking ambition just months earlier. Now they were eager to take on challenging work that required cultural sensitivity and genuine respect for the military community. How do you feel about handling something that big? He asked. Honestly? Sarah said. 3 months ago, I would have been terrified of screwing it up. Now I feel like we have the tools and knowledge to do it right. Because you made sure we understood not just what to do, but why it matters. And if we get stuck, Jake added, we know who to call for guidance. Marcus realized something had shifted in the conversation. These three weren't asking for his permission or approval anymore. They were telling him they were ready to handle the responsibility he had helped them prepare for. Derek stood up. Marcus, we owe you more than we can ever repay. You saved our careers, taught us to be better people, and showed us what real leadership looks like. But maybe it's time for you to stop being our safety net and start being the leader the veteran community needs. After they left, Marcus sat alone in his office, thinking about the conversation. He pulled out his phone and found Colonel Martinez's number. Colonel, it's Marcus Williams. Senior Chief. Good to hear from you. Have you made a decision about the task force position? I have some questions first. Shoot. How many veterans are currently underemployed relative to their skills and experience? Conservative estimate? About 40%. Many of them are working jobs that don't begin to utilize their military training or leadership experience. And how many of them are dealing with the kind of invisibility issues I went through? More than we like to admit. The transition from military to civilian life is hard enough without people making assumptions about what veterans are capable of. Marcus looked around his office, at the campaign materials and training programs he had developed, at the evidence of how much could change when people were willing to see differently. Colonel, I'd like to accept the position. Outstanding. What changed your mind? I realized that hiding behind comfort zones doesn't honor the people we've lost any more than hiding behind mop buckets does. Sometimes you have to step up to the bigger fight. Now you're talking like the senior chief I expected to meet. When can you start? I'll need to finish up some projects here and make sure my team is ready to handle things independently. Is 6 weeks too long? 6 weeks is perfect. That'll give us time to set up your office and introduce you to the program directors you'll be working with. After he hung up, Marcus felt a familiar sensation, the mix of nervousness and excitement that came with accepting a new mission. It had been years since he had felt that particular combination. His computer chimed with an email. The subject line read, from a fellow veteran. Marcus opened it and read, Senior Chief Williams, I heard about your story through a friend who works at Morrison Industries. I'm a former Marine who's been working warehouse jobs for 5 years since my discharge, even though I managed logistics for a 500-person unit overseas. I convinced myself I was lucky to have any job at all. Your story made me realize I've been doing the same thing you did, making myself invisible because I thought that's what I deserved. I just wanted to say thank you for showing me that there might be another way. I'm updating my resume this week and applying for logistics management positions. Wish me luck. Semper Fi. Robert Chen. Marcus stared at the email for a long moment, then forwarded it to Colonel Martinez with a note. This is why I'm taking the job. Her response came back within minutes. This is exactly what we need to fix. Welcome to the team, Senior Chief. As Marcus began planning his transition out of the corporate consulting role, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. 6 months ago, he had been an invisible janitor, hiding from his own potential. Now he was preparing to help hundreds of veterans avoid the same trap. The change hadn't happened overnight. It had started with 3 arrogant executives who made assumptions about a janitor, continued with a crisis that required expertise they didn't have, and culminated with people learning to see past job titles to actual worth. But the real transformation had been his own. Somewhere between being mocked in a hallway and being offered a position of national responsibility, Marcus had remembered something he had forgotten during 8 years of invisibility: that leadership wasn't about rank or title, but about taking responsibility for making things better. A week later, Marcus stood in the company break room, wearing his gray janitor's uniform one last time. He had insisted on finishing out his last week in his original position, completing the job he had been hired to do 8 years earlier. Derek, Sarah, and Jake had protested, saying it was beneath his dignity. But Marcus understood something they were still learning: there was no shame in honest work, regardless of what came before or after. As he emptied the trash cans and mopped the floors, Marcus thought about the veterans who would benefit from the programs he was about to help develop. He thought about Robert Chen, updating his resume and preparing to reclaim his potential. He thought about the hundreds of other veterans who were still invisible, still hiding, still convinced they weren't worth more than they had settled for. By the time he finished his final shift, Marcus had made a decision about how to run the Veterans Employment Program. It wouldn't just be about job placement or skills training. It would be about helping people remember their own worth, teaching them to demand respect rather than accept invisibility, and showing them that their military experience was an asset, not something to downplay or hide. As he hung up his uniform for the last time, Marcus smiled. The janitor who had been mocked 6 months ago was gone forever. In his place stood a man ready to ensure that other veterans never had to choose between hiding their potential and fighting for recognition they had already earned. The real victory wasn't in changing how others saw him. It was in changing how he saw himself. And that change, Marcus knew, was just the beginning.